So I remember even asking Matt, like, do you know, like, is there anything you want me to do or say, or like, what, like, I don't understand, like, because I'm a god, right? So I've got to like have some form of idea. And he was like, buddy, I have no idea what could happen.
Welcome to the Character Sheet, comic books home for everything fantasy and tabletop RPG. I am your host, Producer Pete, and I am joined by a very special guest today. You may know him from his amazing roles on Raised by Wolves or House of the Dragon Season 2, but you definitely know him as the Archheart from Critical Role. It is the one and only Abubakar Salim. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we are here, of course, to talk about your amazing recent run as the Archheart on Critical Role.
Thank you.
And let's start at the beginning, and that's just, how did you and the Critical Role cast meet up? Like, how did you meet in real life that brought you to that table?
Yeah, so I've known Matt since like World of Warcraft sort of days.
Mm-hmm.
I did BlizzCon like years ago when I was, when I got into to play one of the characters of World of Warcraft, and I bumped into him, and I've always I've been a fan of these guys for a very long time, but like I didn't really want to be like, oh my god, I love you, even though I probably did actually on the day, but that was like our first like meeting. And then what ended up happening is did Raised by Wolves, and they called me up and they were like, hey, loved you in Raised by Wolves, we're doing Legends of Vox Machina, do you want to jump in? And I was like, okay, you know what, this is my shot. this is my chance to tell them like how much I love them and how do I get more involved with you guys. And yeah, it just blossomed from there, man. Like, did the recording for them, and then it just, one thing led to another. Ended up hosting them out here in London for Comic-Con, and then started to get involved with them a lot more. Started to essentially roll die with them, which is great.
And speaking of rolling dice, like how deep is your history with like tabletop RPGs? Was that like one of your first games, or are you like a longtime fan?
No, like it's I've been a fan for ages. Like in regards to, like, I remember playing as a kid in my friend's house. His neighbor was our DM, and it was very kind of basic rules. There was nothing about movement, all that kind of stuff. But I loved it. Like, I had so much fun. And I kind of stopped playing because I didn't really have anyone to play with for a very long time. And it was only until recently, where I think it was COVID time, where a friend of mine, Ashley Birch, she asked me to jump on this sort of like role-playing game. It was Vampires the Masquerade. No idea what it was. And it just sort of sparked this love again for it. And I've just thrown myself in all these different types of rule books and games and tabletops. But, originally, D&D has been like, that was my like the birth of the love for this stuff. So I've been playing for a very long time. It's only, like, I'd say recently where I've almost felt comfortable doing it more,
Oh, that makes a lot of, I mean, I feel like that's a very relatable story that a lot of us, I think a lot of people just kind of picked it back up in the pandemic, and that's because virtual tabletops existed, and it was a great way to meet your friends when you couldn't see your friends.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, like, especially because you got brought back into it by Ashley Birch, who had a sort of briefly traumatic history with the Critical Role fans, because everyone was like, no, Keg, like the weird subsection of fans are kind of like, Keg got Molly killed and rah, rah, rah. Did that give you any nerves when you sat down at that table for the first time?
No, man, because I think, like, for me it was all about just supporting and telling the story. I think, like, that's kind of where I of course, you have no idea what's going to happen and where your characters are going to go, or what's going to happen, what's going to actually happen in the world. But it was, again, all I know was essentially that I was going to be on a table full of incredible storytellers, and as long as I just served the story and served the atmosphere and the world of it, like, it's just going to be a bloody good time. So, like, that's kind of where I was sort of leaning in. I'd say, like, the one thing that obviously, that I was super nervous about, obviously, was sitting in a seat, a specific seat. But we can talk about that if you like. But yeah, that was definitely something. But other than that, I'd say, like, truly, it's funny, whenever I'm role playing, or doing any sort of form of tabletop game, I've never felt so almost like in my environment than I have, just because I think there is so much freedom and so much play. And that's the thing. It's like it's a pure essence of wanting to play, which I really kind of connect and enjoy.
No, that makes a ton of sense too. Like and it kind of showed. And let's talk a little bit about that, because it's sort of well, like Travis and Matt and them have all joked about like the whole it's scripted rumor, like that always comes up. But especially in your case, did you have even like bullet points to go off of? Because I know you talked, you were just going by the seat of your pants the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think, and I guess like, for the experience of Downfall, for example, like that was very much, again, like we knew how it was going to end. Everyone knows how it's going to end, right? We know that Aeor is going to fall. How it got there is really what the gaps that we had to fill. And it was like, have at it. Like, it was like, it could have gone anywhere. It could have gone anywhere, but we knew how it was going to end. So there was no bullet points on that front at all whatsoever. And even in, in episode, I think it's 107, where essentially, like, again, the only conversation I had was with Matt and talking about essentially like, yeah, okay, where is his head at now? What's the plan here? Where's the team's head at? What do you think? And it was just, again, it was all about, what do you think? Like, where do you think, what would you say? Where would you go? And I think that's the beauty of it, right? It's like, it isn't scripted. It could go anywhere. Anything could happen. And that's why it is so exciting.
No, and it showed, and it's a lot of that I think was in the performance. And so before we deep dive on the episode a little bit, how did you come up with that sort of, because the Archheart is one of my favorite depictions I've seen of a god, because it's very much that sort of wide spectrum of him. He goes from being terrifying to very relatable and empathetic to almost like completely detached. Like, he's got this very wide variety, and he's not just playing into the whole, the aloof majesty that you kind of see a lot in some. How did you decide? Because I love that you started off with that sort of almost threat to Sam. It was very, very believable, and then shifted gears. Like, did you have an idea for like how his character was going to change? Because the last time we saw him, we saw a much different version of the Archheart who was still struggling with a lot of decisions.
Yes, and I think like I definitely came in with a lot more of an idea of like, I guess I the question I had in my mind is, with throughout the years of having seen the events of what's going on and where I'm at the moment mentally, as well as just seeing how Exandria sort of has evolved over time. Where how do I feel about that? And I think I was answering that question as I was going along with the game, and with especially when it came to talking to the team, because it felt very much like, again, for me, the Archheart is very much a sort of a mirror of his creations, of the people, of the beings. And I think, and that's the beautiful thing about human beings, is that they are so many shades, so many different feelings, emotions, thoughts, opinions, and what we accept that, and I think like that's essentially what these gods are. They are just their parents in a way, or how I kind of envision it. It's like, make them in the image, and that's sort of where I what I wanted to lean into. And I think the real sort of inspiration of it all actually comes from this feeling of, again, realizing that we aren't immortal. We're very powerful, but we're not immortal. And that reality, and sitting and having that sit with me, is very much, especially a thing for the Archheart to be like, well, if I'm not going to be here forever, or the chances are that that could happen, I better live honestly and truthfully, and not mightier than now, if necessary,
Yeah, and he was, in a very, I think, appropriate way, given where he came at from the story. He's like the most human of the gods so far. He's
right.
And you can see he really is kind of a reflection of, he's got, flaws. He's got, actually, speaking of that, what does the Archheart think will happen if the Hells make it to Predathos? And does he think that, in his mind, is he just willing to risk letting them unleash Predathos and like hope for the best? Or does he really believe that like these vessels will contain it? Like, not necessarily where the story is going, but what do you think the Archheart thinks about it?
Honestly, I think the Archheart has no idea. But the thing is, and I think this is the thing that I think charges him and also charges people, is he has faith. I think he has faith that the right thing will happen. And yes, he has his own mentality and his own thoughts of what he wants to happen and where he wants things to go. And he will obviously give his opinions and share his thoughts. But I think he's very aware, or they're very aware, of the reality that not everything is as it seems. And rather than fighting that, you should embrace that, because ultimately you have no control. And I think that's why a lot of the advice shared was very much me saying, like, it's just my opinion and I don't know. And I think I was, again, then the more I kept saying I don't know, because this was the other thing, right? I was very afraid of coming in and playing a god that didn't have answers. But then in the moment, as I realized that I didn't have the answers, it became really exciting. And it became really, really cool to kind of dive into that more and be like, look, I'm exactly like you on this table. Yeah, okay, I've brought you into my realm where I have total control and I can, summon a meteor storm if I really wanted to. But like, ultimately, I do not know. And that's a feeling that I think, even for the many, many years that I have lived, still always excites me, is the unknown.
And I think it made that encounter, I think that's why so many of the characters got on board with it, because not saying that you don't know is something they're not used to hearing from a god. Because when they've dealt with the gods before, it's been a lot of like, this is the way, like this is a certainty. And I think that's what got so many people on board. But speaking of that, one of the people that may have like kind of inadvertently let this plan slip was when Breus reached out to Bahamut and he reached out to to Asmodeus, and Asmodeus answered. Do you think the Archheart anticipated the fact that maybe Asmodeus would sniff this plan out before it had a chance to like come to fruition?
I think the Archheart has definitely, kind of, they've definitely thought of all sorts of scenarios and situations here, right? And I think that's, especially when it comes to the betrayer gods and how they're going to think, they've all, and this is the thing, I think the issue has been with, especially with the primes, right? And the sense of like, oh, we are all, we don't know, but we do know. There's been this like fence sitting. And the thing about the betrayer gods is that they are so direct with how they want to get things done. I think the Archheart has almost taken a leaf out of their book and been like, actually, this is the way forward, and maybe we should think this way, because ultimately this might get us this might move us forward, it might move everyone else forward. We should take a leaf from their book, even though it's not necessarily about causing massacres and wiping out mortality as we know it. But there is something about the directness and the sort of the single mentality of like, this needs to be done, that I think has inspired the Archheart to sort of almost then allow themselves to think like, yeah, maybe the betrayers might get involved. Maybe the betrayers might think of something. But at the end of the day, if Predathos is there, everyone's game.
That's very fair. Does the I know that we talked to Brennan at the very beginning before Downfall, and he talked about his decision to ban the betrayer gods as possible options.
Yeah.
Was there a different god you had your eye on maybe before Brennan sat down?
It
was like, guys,
was the Lord of Hells, man. It was the Lord of Hells.
Asmodeus?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And then he was like, and then I remember Brennan being like, maybe you should try. And I was like, okay, cool. And then, we kind of found the Archheart, but it was definitely the Lord of the Hells. There was something really, again, fascinating about this idea of playing a god who has such a hatred, but almost has to put it aside for family. And what does that mean? So yeah,
and he's one of the, and he keeps popping up. Even the Archheart briefly summoned his version of him.
I know. There's something about him.
There's something there, and I think maybe that's the other thing is with with Asmodeus sort of lurking there, and with the Archheart being kind of thinking through all the angles, do you think the Archheart would kind of take it as like, maybe like, this is probably fine, this is a means to an end, if Asmodeus' version of the plan came to where Predathos was freed, everyone fled but Asmodeus? Because would the Archheart be willing to leave Asmodeus behind to save the rest of his family and just sort of give Exandria to Asmodeus if that was the only option that Asmodeus left the players with?
I don't think that the Archheart would want to put mortality into so much danger and give that feeling of vulnerable, like leave them in such a vulnerable space, especially for someone like the Lord of the Hells. Like, absolutely not, because I think then, and I imagine that the Archheart has a contingency plan for that kind of thing, 100%, because I think I also think as well, and this is just my opinion and my thoughts, I don't think it's as easy as hiding. I think especially with some, like with a hunter, with a predator, I always imagine it like a video game, right? Like if you end up, the characters who run furthest away from the thing that's chasing them, the ones who stay close, like who stay in one place, never really change where their location is. So there's going to be a time when they are the closest thing to go to. So all they have to do is just turn around. You know what I mean? And it's like, then where you're going to go? And I think like that's sort of where what my mentality or my feeling to it all is. It's like, if something's hungry, you go for the thing that's closest. And if we run far enough away, it will turn back for something, for an easy meal.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it's one of the most interesting things about this. And I think two more questions before we get to the lightning round. So speaking of that, just as a fan, do you want to see an Exandria sort of without gods for the next campaign? Or do you think it's more interesting if Predathos gets like resealed and somehow we're left with either the same gods or like they have to, mortals reascend and sort of replace that pantheon? Like, what's more interesting to you?
I think a world without gods is more interesting, because I think it becomes, because it almost becomes, it might form into a world that we feel more related to. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
in the sense that, not necessarily to say that, because like, I'm not saying like gods don't exist here, but like I'm just saying like we know the gods exist, right? In this world, in Exandria. To have them not then be there, what does that look like? And I think that to me is fascinating. There's something really interesting about that. There's something. It's what happens when that restrictive force field, or that barrier, that food chain changes, and then mortality becomes almost top of the food chain. Like, what does that do? And I think like that to me is really fascinating to sort of dive into and examine, as not only as a fan, but also as a storyteller, right? There's something really cool there. So yeah, I'd say like I kind of want the gods out.
I would agree for a similar reason. I think it's easy to have like faith and belief when like your god can just come down and wave at you,
and that they're there.
Like, oh, there's Bahamut, he's just hanging out. Yeah. Like, oh, here's the matron of Raven. She just popped in to say hello in my dreams. Yeah. Versus having them be gone and just seeing what kind of faith fills that void.
What fills that void exactly? Yeah. And it's like, what happens?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I kind of hope it goes that way, but either way, it's going to be
this is
very interesting.
It can go any way, man. And that's the thing. It's like, and again, it's one of those ones. I remember even asking Matt, like, do you know, like, is there anything you want me to do or say, or like what, like, I don't understand, like, because I'm a god, right? So I've got to like have some form of idea. And he was like, buddy, I have no idea what could happen. Like, and that's amazing. I think that's so cool.
And then finally, you were so natural on that show, and like that with a very riveting performance, and it's like the fans loved it. do you like see yourself like is something you're going to keep coming back to if given the opportunity? Because there's always
yeah. I mean, you know what? I'm very good at making myself feel uncomfortable and figuring it out on the way. So if that opportunity comes back again, like 100%. Like and the thing is, again, this is, and I keep saying this, it's like I have so much fun playing with those guys and so much fun playing in that space. In, you know, even just as, you know, just even role playing, like, you know, rolling die. It's there's something so, it reminds me of being a kid again. And I think like that's what I love escaping into, you know, and I think like the world is full of madness, even, you know, especially in today's world. It's nice to have something to enjoy with, you know, with friends and just tell stories. So yeah, 100%, if the opportunity arose to do it, like, yeah, you know, either, you know, on the seat or like as a player, like I think I'd 100% take it.
Oh, fantastic. And we'd love to see it. Hopefully that comes true. And we try and end whenever we can these interviews with a quick lightning round.
Amazing.
So let's jump into a little lightning round here, and I'll cue myself in post to insert graphic now. All right. So you played the Archheart, you know, very, very well in Critical Role. So let's do a quick game of Holy Being or Helicopter. I'm going to give you a name, and you have to tell me if that name is a god or if it's a helicopter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is going, I think we gave, Liam got Byron poem or emo band. Brennan got magical sword or mid-sized sedan. So we figured
amazing.
Holy Being or helicopter seems very fitting. So let's start out with Beerus. God or helicopter? Beerus. God or helicopter?
Oh, that's a god.
That is. It's the god of destruction from Dragon Ball Z.
Exactly. I was like, of course it is. Yeah.
Hextor.
That sounds like a helicopter.
That is a god from Greyhawk.
What?
That's one of those old Gygax gods.
Hextor. Yep. Wow.
Hextor.
Okay. What a name.
Sea King.
Sea King?
Mm-hmm.
It's a god.
It is a helicopter. It's a naval helicopter.
Sea King?
Yes.
Or a Pokemon. Maybe it's can I say Pokemon?
I was this close to doing God or Pokemon. I just couldn't make the alliteration work. Harbin.
Harbin. That sounds like a god.
It does, but it's also a helicopter.
What are these names? Okay.
Just looking through them, I was like, this is amazing. This one is tricky. Shinnok.
A god.
Yes, it's a god from Mortal Kombat that sounds remarkably close to Chinook.
Chinook, yeah.
All right, Oryx.
Oryx. That sounds like a helicopter.
It is a helicopter. It's like someone's like a Bell attack helicopter.
Oh, amazing.
Hylia.
God.
Yeah, Legend of Zelda, the creation god.
Yeah. It's funny how I know all the gods, like, games-wise, right? It's like...
you're right at like 50-50. You're doing great on these. Sulcan. Solcan with a K.
Solcan. That sounds like a helicopter.
Solcan is the god of law from Age of Sigmar.
Oh! Unbelievable. Okay.
All right. We're on the final four. Kiowa.
Okay. Kiowa.
Yep.
That sounds like a god.
It does sound like a god, but it's a helicopter.
No. How is that? No, man. No. What? All right. What helicopter is Kiowa?
Here, let me put it. This is like the one that I somehow didn't write the name down. It's a Bell OH-58 Kiowa. It is a 2-seat attack rocket helicopter. It has...
wow.
Yeah. I'll put a little image of it up on the screen when I do this edit. Yeah, it's a crazy name. All right, final three.
Okay.
The Arapaho. Yes.
Helicopter.
Yes. I think that one is also a god, so that one was a freebie either way, but it is technically a helicopter.
Okay.
Atroa.
That sounds like a god.
It is one of the other Greyhawk gods.
Right, okay.
And then finally, Rudra.
Yeah. It's not Ruidus, is it? No, I would say Rudra sounds like a helicopter, but I'm going to say God.
It was a helicopter.
No way, man! Oh my god, that's what. Go with your gut, guys. That's the lesson today. It's just go with your gut.
Well,
90% is wrong.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you want to watch the amazing performance again of Abubakar Salim, it is of course still on Critical Role. You can watch it on YouTube, episode 107, or on Beacon. You can see him. Well, House of the Dragon season 2 has ended, but Alan's still flying. He's still flying around there. Him and Corliss are still out there.
Yeah.
Get ready for House of the Dragon season 3, and hopefully we will see you before that again, somewhere in the Critical Role family of shows. Thank you so much for your time, and guys, as always, do the liking and subscribing and all the YouTube stuff. And we will be back tomorrow with another video. So thank you so much for watching, and everyone out there, stay safe.